Welcome to Failure Upcycled. This is Dr. Vicki Stieha.
And this is Dr. Kimberly Henderson from Boise State University. In this podcast, Benson identifies relationships as the area of his life where he has experienced the least amount of success.
Building from Benson's topic of relationships, we discuss how they help us develop a better understanding of ourselves.
Good afternoon, Dr. Henderson. My name is Benson. I am a kinesiology major. My emphasis is in biomechanics. I'm also doing pre-medical studies. And I don't know if this was the point of the prompt, but I kind of figured it out that as far as telling you a story about a time I failed, I honestly can't think of a really good story of a time that I gave 110% and still came up short. So I think what I'm going to go with here is I'm thinking about relationships. And I feel like relationships are one of the few times that I've given it all I've got. I can look back on it and say, hey, I gave that thing 110% and it just didn't work out no matter what I tried. And so I'm thinking that's relationships. And that is going to be the time I failed.
So Ben is a super achiever.
Yes, 110%. Can't think of a time where he gave 110% and didn't succeed.
Yeah. And so the examples, thinking about like academics or sports or things like that, yeah, that probably works. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have chance come in with sports, you know.
Oh, well, and especially if there's a team effort, right? Then there's only so much resources or quality of resources that you can contribute to a team.
Right.
Where the as a whole, your contribution might not be as significant.
Right. But then he brings up relationships.
Yeah. And as a psychologist and not even a clinical psychologist, I'm like, those are really significant.
Right.
Those are central.
Yeah, it's not just like, oh, an aside. But it's interesting, the center of his vision is this academic things I can control.
Yeah.
I can give 110% to these things. Mm-hmm. And so I can be successful. And then, there's that relationship off there and can't always do so well. So I think we should talk about relationships and why can't we? I'm giving this 110%. Why can't I always be successful?
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got another person involved.
Yeah.
And it is not just about effort. Maybe it's about attention. Maybe it's about caring. Maybe it's about chemistry, interestingly enough, for a science guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you think about relationships?
See, and that's hard for me. I remember the Jerry Maguire thing, like the big declaration of love when he says, you complete me.
Right.
Everything that we see in relationship literature now says that if you're coupling to be completed, you're already screwed. And being able to hold yourself and be an entity in and of yourself and not seek completion from somebody else is really important to that sort of emotional, holistic health. But there's something to be said about people complimenting you, right?
Compliment, not complete.
Compliment, not complete, right? To find yourself in the context of another person and really like who you are in that context.
Yeah.
And honor that. And I mean, that's everything from a romantic relationship to a professional relationship, right? Like, I like who I am in the context of relating with you. I like the space that's there. I like the authenticity. I like the exploration. I like the vulnerability. All of it feels really, really good to me. And then if, in this dynamic, right, you decide to change the space or you decide to leave the space, how is that supposed to change things for me, right? So the complement versus the completion.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think that one of the things that we've got going on in society, for young people is, you and I have thought about relationships for a long time. And, we've sort of dug into them from these different vantage points. And I think that, and I don't know, Ben might have been reading about relationships an awful lot, but he hasn't gotten there yet, maybe. And this idea that we have to be succeeding at relationships. What does it mean to be succeeding? Maybe you haven't found somebody that's working for you yet, or maybe you're not in a place yourself.
Or maybe your expectations are too high.
Yeah.
Or they're not in line with, not too high, but maybe they're not in line with reality, right? I have a 14-year-old that has a boyfriend. I know, this happened in like 2 weeks. It happened. And even her demeanor when we were gone while she was FaceTiming, I was like, you are not being yourself right now. Like, this is the accent that you have and the hair flip, and all of this stuff.
Gosh.
It is so beautiful to watch, though. Like, it is so endearing and wonderful because you get to try that on and you get to sort of figure that out, You get to figure out what that relating is and how far you're willing to stray from yourself, but you build yourself in those relationships as well.
Right.
I have no idea why I brought up the teenager, but just watching her, manage this new sense of herself in the context of others.
Well, and I think what's really interesting, so here's the connection that I hear in what you're saying, is that Ben said, hey, I've given 100%, 110% in relationships, and still it doesn't work out sometimes. And, where's vulnerability in that, right? So I put myself out there, I make myself vulnerable, and then ultimately I get rejected. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, things fall apart. So your daughter's in the arc, the high part, right? Mm-hmm. 2 weeks, it's all fresh and new and exciting. And, because she's 14, that the dip will come.
Yeah.
I mean, I know because I'm 52, the dip can still come.
It shows.
And so we can turn ourselves around and we can reframe some failures that we have academically and in sports, or, we don't make the time on the race that we wanted. We don't get to be goalie. We
burn dinner.
We burn dinner. But we're not making ourselves as emotionally vulnerable in a lot of these kids' situations as we are with another person when we're trying to, couple. And, even if you're not trying to say, hey, I'm looking for this person to complete me, if I'm just looking to be complimented in a relationship and then I get rejected.
Yeah.
It's not just about your effort. It's about who you are.
Yes.
So it gets at our identity.
Yeah.
And so how can effort get us to not getting rejection about identity? They're in two separate spheres.
Yeah, because if you try hard, you should be successful.
Right, but if you're trying hard in a relationship, that might mean that you're being inauthentic.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Or they might not be receptive.
Might not be
it might not, and then, and to internalize it so much, it's hard to maintain that distance.
Yeah. And I think, interestingly enough, successful relationships often, I'm not going to say they're not about trying, because I think you have to be attentive, but it's a different kind of trying. It's not the effort. It's not the same kind of lift as you have for, getting a 4.0.
Yeah.
It's that kind of just wanting to be in the game.
Well, it's also like those student skills, right? Like if we're going to counsel a student or even an athlete, we talk about training, we talk about endurance, we talk about, getting the same information in novel ways. Like if you're an athlete and you're training to run faster, instead of running on flat ground faster, run up a hill. Mm-hmm. We can change those dynamics, but we don't, as a culture, talk about the same variety of skill set and training it takes to relate. Because in that, right, we have to manifest vulnerability. We have to, focus on communication. We can prescribe really clear. You want to get an A? These are the things you do. Right. You want to be successful in a relationship? These are the things that you can do. But because there's this whole other dynamic entity that may or may not be receptive to efforts.
Right.
Our cultural expectation is if I do more, I get more. That doesn't happen in relating or even in teaching or, even in teaching. And I think about evals, right? I think about getting I see, like, you're like, oh, you know, and you talked about identity. Evals are tough for me. They are really hard for me to read. My favorite evaluations are the ones that tell me how I'm not doing a good job, and not the ones that are attacks on my person. You know, whether it be who I am physically or who I am socially or who I am, you know, my voice or my abrasiveness.
No, I get it. I mean, I think that the evals that talk about your voice or your abrasiveness or things like that, that's feels like, oh, that's getting at who you perceive me to be.
Yeah.
And not what can I do better in terms of the techniques I'm using to help you learn.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm not going to change my abrasiveness. It's that identity piece that you said, you know,
right.
It's that rejection of self. So how do you recontextualize that, right? One of the things that I am coming to understand, you know, and it's easy for me to talk about evaluations, right? Mm-hmm. Because that is something that is, you know, they're anonymous. I don't know who it is. I don't have to look them in the eye and get that information. You know what I mean? So it's like this information that's pretty easy for me to talk about, right?
Right.
Other relationships, maybe not as easily, but one of the things that I've been trying to do with that is really, you know, as far as like prescription in managing myself and relating with other people, is their behavior is not about me. That
is so huge.
You know?
I think that's a really important lesson.
It's them in the context of me. And if my context doesn't nurture them to be a better person or a learning individual, then it's okay. It's okay to have that relationship change.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
Right? I think the important thing to remember is that it's what you're saying. People in a relationship have to have, it's almost not trying in some ways. Ironically, or paradoxically, there's both this try hard not to try hard.
Be yourself.
Be yourself. And it's not that you don't have to work on a relationship. You have to be creative. Mm-hmm. You have to think about, especially, I've been married for 25 years, you know. You have to think, what do I not know, even after 25 years?
Yeah.
But being willing to look at a relationship and say, okay, I'm not myself in this relationship, or you're, you know, this is just not complimenting me in the way that I needed to compliment me, or I don't feel like I can give you what you need. And to be honest about that. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a matter of, you know, the same kind of 110% effort. In some ways, going into it, if you feel like you have to put in 110% effort, walk away now.
Yeah.
I think the effort comes later. At the beginning, it should be effortless.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, romantically, I agree.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, but we also live in a culture where, you know, we're not paired.
Yeah.
We choose our coupling.
Yeah.
Most of us choose our coupling.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think there's a few really good things there, right? The authenticity, knowing yourself, having that. I mean, we've talked about identity before.
Yeah.
You know, and there are some things, I mean, I constructed a lot of the things that I care about through my relationships with other people. And not just romantically, because that was one of the things that he didn't just say romantically, right? It's just all of those relationships.
Right. No, and I think, you know, thinking about friends, right? Mm-hmm. The friends that empower you are the ones where you've got this reciprocity. It's back and forth. It's not a lot of effort. Mm-hmm. That you have trust, that you can be vulnerable. And that's where you can build in those relationships through those features. And if those, what do we call them, ideas? No, if those variables, right? If we don't have trust, if we don't have the ability to be vulnerable, if we don't have reciprocity, if we don't have empathy as foundations for a relationship, the relationship's not going to grow.
Yeah. You're not going to be successful in it. It's not going to complement you.
Right.
It's not going to help you get where you want to be.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, better.
Yeah. It's not, it doesn't feel to me like it's about effort as much as it's about these other variables, these other elements that have to be there.
Yeah, for sure. That's a big one. Good job.